Can you hear us?
Yes, yes, sorry, I was muted.
Please accept our humble obeisances.
Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Welcome back to the VIHE.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We'd like to welcome everyone to this wonderful seminar, which is an addition to the Bhaktivedanta studies as well as the Bhakti Vaibhav studies. As you know, we are studying the Nectar of Devotion, chapters 1 to 19, introduction to 1 to 19, in the Bhakti Shastri, at the time we study the Bhagavad Gita and so on. So very rarely we get to study the rest of the book. And Srila Prabhupada told us that we should continue to study the Bhakti Shastri books as we continue through the following degrees. So this time we will be studying the second part of the Nectar of Devotion. And if we are fortunate, sometimes in the future, we can continue to study till the end of the book. So I welcome all of you. We have here, as we know, some of our current students in Bhakti Vaibhav and Bhaktivedanta. And we have some others also, some alumni, some guests, some of our teachers. So you're all most welcome. And we welcome especially Urmila Mataji, who will be teaching. So I would say just start, Urmila, we are ready.
Okay, thank you very much. How many students are we expecting altogether?
I think about 40. Yesterday it was 44.
Okay, because right now we have 29. Okay, so I think first we can just chant Jaya Radha Madhava. So please do respond, but stay muted. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yasodanandana Braja Janaranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivratikacharya Asatara Satashri Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Shri Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dhama Ki Jai, Mathura Dhama Ki Jai, Navadvip Mayapur Dhama Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dhama Ki Jai, Gangamaya Jamuna Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale. Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Sarasvati Deve Gauravani Pacharni Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Bhaskatyade Satarni. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavam Cha. Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Samsajivam Sadvaitam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahita Krishna Chaitanya Deva. Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lavita Shri Vishakambitam Cha. Panchakapatubhishta Kipasnaviyavata Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnaveva Namo Namo. So welcome. And today is the 8th of August, 2021 from the VIHE. And we're going to be studying Nectar of Devotion, chapters 20 through 34. Today we're just doing an overview. Okay. All right. So today we're going to be doing an overview of the course. And first, I would like to start with some acknowledgements. So in preparing for this course, I have, of course, studying again Prabhupada's Nectar of Devotion, but I'm also studying the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, translated by Banu Maharaj. And so I really want to acknowledge his great help. Every once in a while, I ask him a question, which he answers. I've also asked some questions of Hari Parshad Prabhu, and I've also gotten some materials from Raj Kishore, particularly in today's slideshow. There's about 5 slides from him. So I would just like to acknowledge that. I've also referenced materials done by Bhakti Chaitanya Maharaj and by Bir Krishna Maharaj, who've taught the Southern Ocean before. So there's Bir Krishna Swami has done a lot of charts on this section of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. I'm not using the charts directly in the presentations, but I do reference them to make the presentations, and I can make them available to the participants. All right, so why should we study the Nectar Devotion at all? Why the Nectar Devotion? Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Nectar Devotion, of course, is Prabhupada's summary study of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Why do we accept the Nectar Devotion as authorized scripture? This is not an unimportant question. You know, there's, to some extent, we can say that anyone who follows the Vedas, any follower of the Vedas, who nowadays would be known, of course, as Hindus, accept the same writings as authorized. We all accept the Rig Veda, the Samar Veda, Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda as authorized. And some followers of the Vedas only accept that. That's as far as they go, right? And then many also accept the Upanishads. Of course, interesting, the Ishopanishad is part of the Yajur Veda, and some accept the Puranas. But how many people are going to accept Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu? This is just going to be the Gaudiyas. This is not going to be accepted as authorized scriptures by other sampradayas. And that's okay. Each sampradaya has its particular authorized books by its acharyas. And our main reason we accept the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu as authorized scriptures is that it was spoken by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Rupa Goswami. As Srila Prabhupada writes about himself in the Nectar Devotion. Of course, it always fascinated me that a tremendous amount of the material from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is in Chaitanya Charitamrita as being spoken to Sanatana Goswami rather than Rupa Goswami. Now, another reason we accept the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and of course Nectar Devotion is authorized scriptures, is something which we could point to other people in other sampradayas and say, hey, this is authorized scripture because Rupa Goswami is profusely quoting from other shastras in order to substantiate what he's saying. And this is a standard that's applicable to all of us, that all of us as preachers of Krishna consciousness, that what we say can be as authorized as Shastra if we back everything up from Shastra. And as we'll be seeing in our next class, it's one of the qualities of Krishna, that he's Shastra Chakshus, which is kind of fun. Because of course he's the originator of all the Shastra. But this is a way in which we can also speak authorized Shastra. And another reason why we accept the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And this is a very important point. I mean, we could give probably 10 classes on this one point, that everything we say should be backed up with Shastra, that we shouldn't say something whimsically. Recently in some research we were doing on the Shastric Advisory Council, we ended up with some statements that have been made by many leaders in our Gaudiya Sampradaya, both in and out of ISKCON, that we couldn't find any kind of citation for at all. Nobody ever quoted any Shastra for it. Nobody ever quoted any previous Acharya for it, but it became repeated. It became, part of the, oh yes, this is true kind of thing. So we need to be very careful. All right, so what is the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu? Bhakti means devotion. Rasa is mellow, which we'll mostly be discussing today. What does Bhakti, what does Rasa mean? Amrita is nectar or eternal. Sindhu is an ocean. So the nectar of devotion, the nectar ocean of devotion. Now, in the beginning of the southern part, Rupa Goswami gives a Mangal Acharana, and I'd like to ask for a volunteer to please read this. Anybody just volunteer, just unmute yourself and read this out loud.
Mataji, can I read, Mataji?
Yes, thank you.
Mangala Charana. In the second division of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the author offers his respectful obeisances unto Sanatana. This Sanatana can be interpreted as either Sri Krishna himself or as Sanatana Goswami, the elder brother and spiritual master of Rupa Goswami. In the case where Sanatana is accepted to means Krishna, Sri Krishna, the obeisances are offered to Krishna because he is naturally so beautiful and because he is the killer of the demon Aga. If it is interpreted to mean Sanatana Goswami, then it is because he is so greatly favored by Rupa Goswami, being always served by him, and because he is the annihilator of all kinds of sinful activities. In this division of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the author wants to describe the general symptoms of the transcendental mellow loving mood of discharging devotional service. Thank you.
Thank you so much. For those of you who took the hermeneutics course, you'll see here that Srila Prabhupada is applying hermeneutics. He's taking a particular verse and he's giving two very different explanations, two very different possible explanations of the verse. And both of them can be correct, although they're different from each other. All right, so somebody needs to mute. There's somebody who needs to mute. Okay, are we all right? Okay, I want to go over, this is just a little housekeeping. I want to go over something about the structure of the course. So it's expected that all of you are going to do some preparation for this course. So before each class, we would expect that you would read the corresponding section in the Nectar Devotion. These are relatively short chapters. It's not a lot of reading. And wow, this section of the Nectar Devotion is just pure nectar. It's just pure nectar. It's such a joy to read. And if you don't have time to read, you can get an audiobook and listen to an audiobook. If you don't have an audiobook, you can ask, I can give that to everyone. Now, I'm also asking, if possible, if you can read the corresponding section in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Now, I'm going to be referencing that extensively. However, if you can read that, it will really deepen your understanding. I'm not asking for it, but if you can, that would really deepen everything. The other thing that I'm asking for, and this is very important, is that you write down 3 questions about the reading these should be difficult questions. You should try to write questions that I can't answer, that I'm not going to know. This is called the stump the teacher questions. And they should be questions that you really want to know the answer to. These questions need to be submitted to Shakti Swarupini or Bhakti Dovale at least 24 hours before the class. So why? This class for me starts at my 5:30 in the morning. And so if you send the questions 10 hours in advance, I won't see them. Now, why do I want them 24 hours in advance? So Shakti Swarupini or Bhakti Dovale or whoever they want to assign, them might assign someone else, will collect all these questions into a document and send them to me. So then I'll get them, like 22 hours in advance. So I didn't expect that for this class because it was an overview, but we do have one devotee who did turn in questions. And because of his questions, I spent an extra hour, hour and a half researching the answer to one of his questions. I then added material to my lesson 3 that I think really enhanced the course. I wouldn't have had it there otherwise. It really deepened my understanding of the course. And it really, I think, added quality to the course for everyone. Also, this principle of asking questions is something that is the whole basis of the Bhagavatam. The whole Bhagavatam is based on the questions and answers between the sages in the forest at Naimisharanya, between Sukadeva and Parikshit, and then between all, Devahuti and Kapila and so forth and so on. Okay, so the class itself will be part me just talking and part interaction. So we're going to have some interactions, some breakout groups, and so forth. Now, something I didn't put in the syllabus, but I would really like all of you to do, is that after each class, you keep a journal where you write your reflections and how you're going to apply the material, where you write your reflections and how you're going to apply the material. 5 minutes, 2 minutes even. It can be, something you just speak into your phone or whatever, some kind of reflection and application of the material. All right, so why are we doing this course? So we're doing this course to relish the mellow of devotional service. We don't just want to lick the outside of the jar of honey. Right? We don't want to just lick the outside. We want to be tasting that honey. We want to be relishing that. So during the class itself, we want to do that while we're preparing for the class, while we're reading and preparing. And by the way, thinking of those 3 questions while you're preparing, it really impels a person to prepare deeply and read deeply. It will so much greatly enhance your own reading. Then hopefully we'll be relishing the mellow of devotional service during our class time and also during our reflection time. And then hopefully that will start to pervade our whole life. Another aim is to be able to appreciate, meditate on, and explain the 5 components of Rasa, which is the whole topic of this section of the Southern Ocean. And then we looked at the 7 purposes of ISKCON. I was thinking every single thing we do should be fulfilling at least one of the 7 purposes of ISKCON. So here I found 2, to bring the members of the society together with each other and nearer to Krishna, the prime entity. And to bring the members of the society together with each other is something that we will accomplish, especially in the breakout sessions. To systematically understand spiritual knowledge and the techniques of spiritual life, and then I put in as taught by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Rupa Goswami. So this is very systematic. Rupa Goswami is extremely systematic in his teaching. So our understanding can also be very systematic. And definitely this section of Nectar Devotion is very concerned with the techniques of spiritual life. All right, so what are the expectations? So what can you expect of me? You can expect of me that I will read and study the material in depth. Also, as I say, I'm consulting with other Vaishnavas and scholars when I have questions or if I'm trying to understand things more deeply. You can expect that I'm going to analyze and organize the material and make it as easy as possible for you to understand and as easy as possible for you to remember. You can expect of me that I'm going to be planning learning activities for you. You can expect that I'm going to start on time and I'm going to end on time. And hopefully you can expect that I will have Vaishnav etiquette. And if I don't, please let me know. What can I expect of you? I'm expecting of you that you're going to read and study the material as preparation, that you're going to write 3 questions for every class and have them turned in on time. I can expect that you're going to participate in the interactive learning with the other students, that you're not just going to, officially sign into the class and then go take a walk. I can want to expect from you that you are going to arrive on time and that in the absence of any emergency, you will stay for the duration of the class. And I will expect also Vaishnav etiquette from all of you. Okay. Just briefly, does anybody have any question at all? We don't have a lot of time, but anyone have any question? Please put in the chat. If anyone has any question about the structure of the course, expectations. You should have all received a syllabus and you should have all received a copy of Banuswami's translation of the Southern Ocean. I will be making these PowerPoints available to everybody later so that any of you can take them and use them and teach them as well. Okay, so let's look at the Southern Ocean. There's the 5 components of Rasa, and we're going to look at English translations and how Srila Prabhupada translates these terms. One thing to keep in mind is that Nectar of Devotion was published very, very early in the Hare Krishna movement. It was one of the first books that Srila Prabhupada published. And trying to translate these terms into English is extremely difficult. These are not easily translatable terms. In fact, Srila Prabhupada himself was saying that he couldn't figure out how to translate the word rasa. And so he used Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's translation, which is the English word mellow, which isn't really, at least maybe it wasn't Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's time, but in our time, the word mellow doesn't quite fit. And Srila Prabhupada said it doesn't quite fit. And how Srila Prabhupada translates these other words are also a little difficult. So we have bhivava, which can be called ecstatic excitants or causes of ecstasy, anubhava, ecstatic expressions or subsequent ecstasy, sattvika bhava, involuntary ecstatic expressions or existential ecstasy, vyabhichari bhava, transient ecstatic disturbances or aggressive ecstasy, sthaya bhava, a permanent ecstatic mood or continuous ecstasy. Okay, I see we have. Okay, you're asking how can you reflect and journal on them? Hopefully there'll be something you can, if there's nothing that you can reflect on and journal on from this class, then I have massively failed as a teacher. So it's a very good question. One of the responsibilities of a teacher, I'd say the main responsibility, is to make sure what they teach is relevant to their audience. And in fact, one thing we'll be discussing in the second half of this class is how this is relevant to us. So we're going to use these simplified English translations. If you want to use the other English translations, you can for yourself. But for the purpose of this class, we're going to use these very simplified English translations. And we're going to have some exercise in the second half of the class to help us memorize them. So vibhava, we're going to call stimulants, anubhava, voluntary expressions, sattvika bhava, involuntary expressions, vyabhichari bhava, emotions, sthaya bhava, basic connection. And Srila Prabhupada quoting, without some mixture of these 5 ecstatic principles, one cannot relish transcendental bliss. All right, I'm going to ask, who can give me a definition of rasa? There are some definitions given in Nectar Devotion in the preface, and there are some definitions given in chapter 20. So if anybody wants to raise their hand, you can write in the chat or raise their hand. By the way, I really want to thank Gaura Krishna Prabhu, who is the one who gave the questions for this class and really deepened my own study. Thank you a million times. Prabhupada Priya, yes. What's the definition of rasa?
The sweet taste that comes from a relationship, which impels one to keep going in whatever one is doing.
Very nice. And that definition you've taken from the?
Beginning of the Nectar of Devotion.
Yes, from the preface, which is the preface in Nectar of Devotion, by the way, is one of my favorite parts of Srila Prabhupada's book. Thank you. Anybody else? So we have in the chat mellow, but again, mellow, that may have been an appropriate word in Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's time. In 2021, in English, the word mellow means kind of laid back and not very ambitious. A sort of, yeah, I'll get to it tomorrow. And if you ever spend any time in a place by a tropical beach culture tends to be very mellow. Mellow can also mean something you let sit for a while. Like you make some herbal tea and I prepared some herbal tea and you let the herbs mellow in the water. Yes, Rukmini.
The particular loving mood or attitude relished in the exchange of love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called Rasa or mellow.
Thank you.
That's from chapter 20.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. And we have in the chat window, Purna Prajakeshwar Prabhu says, a relationship with Krishna where prema is the base and is being expressed in 5 primary relationships. Oh, I really like that. That is such a nice definition. Thank you very much. All right. Let's go on and look at some quotes from the preface and from chapter 20. So in the preface, Prabhupada explains that Bhakti Rasa is the spiritual pleasure of devotional service, which one can taste by being trained in the science of devotional service. And in the preface, he says, Bhakti means devotional service. Every service has some attractive feature which drives the servitor progressively on and on. Now, this is interesting. He says that force which drives the philanthropist, the householder, and the materialist is called rasa, or a kind of mellow relationship whose taste is very sweet. Bhakti rasa is a mellow different from the ordinary rasa. So Srila Prabhupada saying this is very important to our study of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu because Rupa Goswami is basing his work on Bharat Muni. And Bharat Muni was describing rasa that applied not only to spiritual life, but that applies in general. So everything has some rasa. This is a very important point because it means that what we're going to be studying in the next few weeks can all be applied in a perverted way to everything we experience in this world. And why is that so important? Because it means that everything that we experience in this world can act as an impetus for us to remember the reality. The reflection can give us an impetus to remember the reality. Right? All right, from chapter 20, Prabhupada writes, the particular loving mood or attitude relished in the exchange of love with the Supreme Personality of Godhead is called rasa or mellow. And here again, Prabhupada's making a similar point as to what he made in the preface, that if there's not some kind of loving mood in one's activities, no one can continue to perform those activities. Similarly, in the transcendental life of Krishna consciousness and devotional service, there must be some mellow or specific taste from the service. Now, this particular quote from chapter 20, really shows the relevance of what we are studying, even for a beginner in Krishna consciousness. Because even a beginner in Krishna consciousness is not going to be able to do some service unless they're getting some taste or some pleasure from that service. Because it's impossible to do something without pleasure. These kind of quotes also give us some indication, and we're not going to be discussing this in depth, but this is something extremely important as to how to get rid of our anarthas. That whatever anarthas we have, we are getting some kind of mundane rasa from them. Many times with anarthas, people think, I don't really want to be doing this. Like Arjuna asked in the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita. He says, why do I do things against my own will, as if I'm forced to do them? And then Krishna says, it's your own karma, it's your own desire. You appear to be doing something against your will, but that's not the case. Whatever you're doing, you actually desire to do that. So one of the ways to unwind in an artha is to figure out, and this, it's hard to do because we don't want to admit that we're getting pleasure from nasty things, is to figure out what kind of taste that we're getting, and then to ask ourselves, how could I get that taste in Krishna consciousness? How could I get that taste in the reality? So a very literal translation of rasa would be juice, what carries flavor. What is the part that we enjoy, the pleasure or joy of any experience. And of course, it's a little funny because some of the rasas don't appear to be joyful. Like of the 7 secondary rasas, there's comedy or joy, there's wonder, right? But there's also things like ghastliness and fear and anger, which may not appear to be pleasurable. But if they weren't pleasurable, people wouldn't do things to experience them. Like the reason that people go to political rallies is to experience anger. It's a lot of the reason people go to sporting competitions. I mean, there's some chivalry, but there's also anger. People like to go to amusement parks to experience fear. Isn't it? Right? Or if you say to someone, oh, that's disgusting, they'll say, let me see it. People want to experience disgust. A lot of gossip is to experience disgust. Oh, do you know what he did? Do you know what she did? Oh, I can't believe she did that. So and if you think of the entertainment industry, you know, movies and books and so forth, computer games, a lot of it is involving fear, anger, disgust, grief. These are all tastes, and rasa is the taste. It also has an Ayurvedic connotation of taste. Now, rasa is also aesthetic. So again, Rupa Goswami based his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu on the work of Bharata Muni. And Bharata Muni describes all the same components that Rupa describes as what is the essence of all art, drama, music, poetry, etc. So anything that's designed to give any kind of pleasure. Just a little side note that the main function, one of the main functions of those who work in the Shudra Varna is to provide these sort of pleasures in society. In the Shudra Varna, we find most of the arts. Some of the arts are Brahminical, as they're under the control of Sarasvati. But we do find, you know, music, dance, theater, and so forth and so on, poetry, anything that's meant to provide some sensory pleasure, something for the senses and the mind, some pleasure, which is one of the necessities of life. This is an essential part of human civilization. And we could say that rasa is the ultimate aim of consciousness. As Srila Prabhupada was once asked, what is the purpose of life? He said the purpose of life is ananda. And if we look again technically, the Upanishads are describing different layers. This is also part of Ayurveda. And the core layer is consciousness, and the goal is ananda. The goal is pleasure. And this pleasure is superior even to liberation. You know, sometimes the impersonalists say that in liberation, there's no ananda, because to have ananda, there has to be a person who's experiencing ananda. I mean, you can't just have like kind of diffused ananda. There has to be some experiencer of ananda. Now, it's very interesting. Right before the pandemic lockdown, I was invited to teach some classes at the Shivananda ashram in the Bahamas, where a number of devotees have gone there. They're very open to having ISKCON members and devotees go to Vaishnavas present, but they themselves are impersonalists. I mean, they worship Krishna, but they worship everybody, and they're impersonalists. They're not offensive, but they're definitely impersonalists. And every day they would say this prayer, I am bliss. I am bliss. I am Ananda. But if they try to analyze their bliss, they can't get very far because they're impersonalists. Whereas in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami extensively, in depth, with so many examples, is analyzing what is bliss, what is happiness. We have sometimes scientific surveys. What's the happiest country? Or, how do you measure happiness? Well, happiness is a satisfying career. Happiness is a loving family. Happiness is good health. Happiness is not being at war, something like that, right? People have some idea what is happiness. I remember when I was 13, I was babysitting some kids and they were sleeping. So I had some time. And I was thinking, what is the purpose of life? I thought the purpose of life is to be happy. And then I thought, well, am I happy? So I made a list of what I had. Well, I have a nice family. I get good grades in school. I made this list. And then I looked at the list and I said, I guess I must be happy. But Rupa Goswami is explaining what actually is happiness. Now, every different substance has a different flavor. Mango has a different flavor from a peach, which has a different flavor from a grape, which has a different flavor from bitter melon, right? Which has a different flavor from chili. And the supreme substance, the personality of Godhead, with the supreme flavor, is pure love. Now, the basic dynamics of rasa, and again, it's very important. We're not going to be repeating this over and over and over and over again during the course. But the basic components of rasa are there in any endeavor. In any endeavor. Somebody who's going to work to make money, the components of rasa are there. You're mopping your floor, the components of rasa are there. Everything we do has the aim of enjoying rasa. Something Prabhupada says in the preface, he says again in chapter 20, everything. And this key, that these basic dynamics are always there, again, really will help us in our own personal devotional service. It will certainly help us appreciate what we study in the Shastras. And it will also help us to get free of the things that are not really giving us the kind of rasa we want. So the basic dynamic is that there's a basic flavor of the experience that needs to get stimulated, produces transformations, and produces expressions. So this is a very good summary. The basic flavor of the experience is relishes rasa when it gets stimulated and produces transformations and expressions in the experiencer. Basic flavor of the experience is relishes rasa when it gets stimulated and produces transformations and expressions in the experiencer. Now, where does bhakti rasa come from? How do we get bhakti rasa? How do we go from the material perversions, not very satisfying kinds of rasa, to bhakti rasa? So we have two ways. One is from the association of devotees in this life, and another is from the association of devotees in a previous life. Ultimately, we get it by the association of devotees. And devotees are a very important component in rasa, which we'll be looking at in lesson 3. But devotees are the important component in all of the stages of bhakti. By those who are experiencing rasa, we get rasa. Wow, I want what they have. Right? We see Srila Prabhupada, I want to be happy like him. I want to be like that. I want what they have. Just like I regularly take prasadam at the home of my granddaughter and her husband, and they have 2 little children, 1.5 and 3.5. And the 1.5-year-old, he sits in a little chair that rests on the top of the table. And I usually am the one feeding him when I'm there. So I'm sitting right next to him. So whatever I feed him, he looks over his chair and he looks at what I'm eating. And he wants to make sure that anything I have, he has. And if anything that I have looks at all different than what he has, he makes a big fuss until he gets it. He's like, I want that. If my grand is eating it, then I want to eat it. So it's like that. We have association with devotees, and then we say, wow, I want that. I want that. So that can happen in this life, or it can start in previous lives that we continue. And then Srila Prabhupada says, for one who has actually come to the spiritual platform, the first symptom visible will be that he is always joyful. Now, there's another place where Srila Prabhupada writes that without being joyful, one cannot make any advancement. That's kind of interesting. So I'd like to ask for any thoughts about what's the role of joyfulness as a symptom of advancement and as a means to advancement. Any thoughts? You can raise your hand or you can put something in the chat. So joyfulness both as a way to advance and as a symptom of advancement. Yes, Balaji Priya.
It is an indication that you're relishing or you're tasting the rasa.
So why is it such an important indication, would you say?
Because it's a natural expression. I mean, I think feeling happy is the most natural expression.
Thank you. Thank you. Sitarani?
Because devotional service is susukham. So, it is supposed to make one joyful. So it is a symptom that one is performing bhakti properly if one is joyful.
Very nice. And I'd like everybody, like what Sitarani just said, burn this into your consciousness. It's a symptom we're doing bhakti properly. It's a symptom we're doing bhakti properly. If we're not joyful, when we teach the Manashiksha, when Raghunath Goswami in the 6th verse talks about burning in donkey urine, where he says, you think you're getting a bath, but you're burning. So if we say, I'm doing bhakti, but I'm always disturbed, I'm not joyful, then something's wrong. I love what Gaur Krishna Prabhu said in the chat, being joyful pleases Krishna. Yes, it does. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is begging for ecstasy. Why does it please Krishna? Because Krishna loves us and he wants us to be happy. Just like we want the people we love to be happy. But Krishna wants us to be happy genuinely. And just like we would like to be the cause of the happiness of our loved ones. So the greatest thing we can give Krishna is being happy, being caused by him. Yes, Sham Kishore Prabhu.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Mataji. So joyfulness is almost like a motivation. So be it a spiritual activity or a material activity, without being joyful, it's almost like a fuel which drives us to achieve our purpose. And on the spirituality side, because Rupa Goswami also said, Utsahan Nishchet Dhairya. So Utsahan, you can be, you can have this Utsaha only when you have joyful.
Thank you. Thank you. And Utsaha means, of course, also, yes, very, very, like almost festive, isn't it? And I like what Purna Prajikeshwar Prabhu said. It's the state of it's our natural state. It's our constitutional position. Prabhupada Priya.
Yeah, I was thinking that, for example, if we go on Harinam, then some people are going to become joyful seeing the devotees. They're going to smile and maybe dance, join in, and other people are just going to be disgusted. So we were mentioning how, bhakti or rasa, these symptoms manifest in accordance with one's advancement from previous lives. So from that, we can take that people's joyfulness is a manifestation of the advancement that they've done in previous lives.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Ratnam Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Mataji, I feel being not joyful is because lack of knowledge about our true identity. So not joyful means it's a lack of knowledge about our true identity. That's
Excellent, excellent. The lack of joy means that we're in ignorance. Pratik Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Like we see, we are Satchitananda. So as we practice Krishna consciousness, if we are coming closer to our true identity, that is a symptom that we are advancing in Krishna consciousness.
That's one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. And this is also said by Kasturika, that it's because that's who we are. We are full of Satchitananda, and therefore, if we're making progress, then we should exhibit that. All right, this 2 slides I got from Bhanu Swami. So we're going to, Rupa Goswami is going to be looking at the ingredients of rasa. The ingredients, again, this is an analysis of joy. So what are the ingredients of rasa that when you put them together properly, you have rasa? Okay, so here again, we're going to look at the words that we'll use in this seminar, what the translations will use. Though there's, what are the ingredients? So there's a basic connection to the flavor of the thing. Again, a basic connection to the flavor. The flavor of the thing is what we want. That's the rasa. That connection gets stimulated somehow. Then there's a result from the stimulation. There's an expression. And there's an automatic tangible result, an involuntary expression. And there's an emotional result. All right. So basic connection is called the staibhav. And don't worry, second half of this class, we're going to go through these and we're going to memorize them. Yes, we are. The basic connection is the staibhav. Stai means to stay. The type of affection towards Krishna. The stimulants called the vibhav, things related to that affection. Voluntary expressions, anubhav, are ways of expressing the stimulated affection. Involuntary expressions, sattvika bhavs, are involuntary ways of expressing the stimulated affection, and then emotions are non-physical expression like rapture or remorse. Of course, vyabhichari bhavs do also show up in actions of the body. So let's look at this. We have a question here about joyfulness. How do we understand joyfulness and separation? That is because there are, again, 7 secondary staibhavs, and there are about 30 vyabhichari bhavs, and some of those emotions appear not joyful. But as I was giving the example earlier, people enjoy anger and fear and horror and grief. If people didn't enjoy those things, there wouldn't be sad movies and horror movies and scary movies, and people wouldn't go to sporting events. So joyfulness can sometimes be expressed in very interesting ways. So let's look at an example in ordinary life. So a girl feels romantic affection for a boy. That's the staibhava connection. She hears that he's coming. That's a vibhava, it's a stimulant. So she starts to fix her hair. That's an anubhava, it's expressive result. She starts to perspire. That's a sattvika. That's her involuntary response. And she feels anxiety. That's an emotional result. So this is we could use any kind of relationship and we could put it into these categories. Okay, so the staibhav, the basic connection, it's stimulated by a vibhav. It's expressed voluntarily as an anubhav, involuntarily as a sattvika bhav, and then there are emotions, vyabhichari bhav, that nourish the staibhav like waves nourishing the ocean. And all of these 5 components together produce rasa. And our bhakti, when it's acted on by Krishna's potencies, the Ladini, Samvid, and Rati potencies. I've been listening to Gopi Pranadana Prabhu's classes on the Priti Sandarbha of Jiva Goswami, where these things are also discussed. And he's making the point that ultimately this has to be mercy, that Krishna is attracted by our attempt, and he gives us this mercy from his potencies. So how does one experience Bhakti Rasa? First, there has to be some relationship with Krishna. This is the point of our sadhana. And when it becomes bhava, it's real enough that we start experiencing Bhakti Rasa in a very intense way. It's tasted fully and easily at prema, slightly at bhava. In sadhana, we get only glimmers of reflections. But we do get those glimmers and reflections, which is what enables us to go on in our life. All right. Srila Prabhupada's instructions about teaching is that there should be breaks. And as I'm trained in education, I know that it's very important to have breaks. It's very important to restore. And so we're going to have a 10-minute break. I would like to ask you to please take a real break. Get away from your computer, get away from your phone, walk, move, depending on what time of day it is where you're there, maybe take some prasadam, use the restroom, go outside, take a real break. I will. Welcome back. Thank you for being punctual. All right, we're going to just briefly talk about these 5 components of rasa, and then we're going to be having the rest of our classes going into these in depth. So this is just an overview. We're not going to understand this completely right now. We're just getting a basic beginning understanding of the framework. And then as we go on each week, we're going to be fitting the details into the framework. We're going to be expanding it. It's going to be flowering. So the first is vibhava. Vibhava is, again, what stimulates, what brings out the basic component of relationship. And this vibhava has 2 parts. Alambana, which is basic, and udipana is stimulants. So then basic has 2 parts. The vishaya, the experience object of love, Krishna, and ashraya, the experiencer, shelter, the devotee. Lord Krishna had a question about this, which will be answered at the end of lesson 3. It was an excellent question. Right? Now, if we're going to think about this in ordinary, mundane terms, so I like to give the example that in the days pre-COVID, when I used to travel regularly, I was at an airport and we were waiting in a line, we were waiting in a queue to board the plane. And there was a little girl there, 2 or 3 years old, which one photographer told me is the ultimate cuteness stage. And she was in a costume, like a princess or fairy costume or something. So her cuteness was magnified, probably about 20-fold, but boy, was she cute. And then I assume they were her parents were there. As everybody's in the queue, she's running up and down, and she's running to her parents, away from her parents, to her parents, and they're picking her up and they're smiling and so forth. And all, if maybe most, I don't know, of the other people waiting in line, we're also looking at this child with some pleasure of a parental mood. So who was the Vishaya? Was the child. She was the object of this parental joy we were feeling. Ashraya was her parents, because her parents were the experiencing the mood, and their experience of this parental mood stimulated it in us as the observers. And what were the stimulants? That she's running up and down, that they're throwing her in the air and catching her, her costume. We're also stimulating her age, we're also stimulating that mood. So Alambana is Krishna, the devotee who loves Krishna, and the things about Krishna, his flute, his garments, his so many things about Krishna, which can be stimulants. All right, then Anubhav. So Anubhav is what we do voluntarily. What we do voluntarily in response to the stimulus and this basic mood, right? So we might smile at this little girl. We might say to her, are you excited to get on the plane? We might wave at her, right? And there's things you can do with or without strong bodily movement. So in Bhakti, Anubhavs are things like dancing. You know, how do we express these feelings of joy we have in relationship to Krishna? What do we do? And I think we could say that the majority of service we do is like that. It's our voluntary expressions of our feeling for Krishna. Then we have the Sattvika bhavs. So Sattvika bhavs, this comes very much from the word sattva, which we'll get into how Rupa Goswami defines a sattva. It's not the same as like sattva guna. But these are things that happen involuntarily, right? I'm seeing the little girl running. I might just smile myself. I'm not smiling at her. I'm just smiling, or my eyes light up, right? So these are in relation to primary sthai-bhavs. The primary sthai-bhavs are, as you know, neutrality, service, friendship, parental, and conjugal, and their relationship to the secondary sthai-bhavs, joy, wonder, fear, chivalry, and so forth. So when these primary or secondary sthai-bhavs get stimulated by the vibhav, and we do things intentionally, there's also things we do unintentionally, like we may perspire, we may cry, our hairs may stand on end, we may become stunned. So these are just, they're automatic reactions in the body, and Rupa Goswami explains how these automatic reactions happen in relationship to the different material elements of the body. Now, often these are directly related. So they're directly related to a devotee's feeling of friendship with Krishna, a devotee's feeling of service for Krishna, a devotee's feeling of wonder. You know, I was just talking to someone the other day who said, you know, my stimulus is coming mostly from the creation. You know, you get a feeling of wonder. Wow, look at that sunrise Krishna created. And your hairs stand on it. You just become stunned looking at the. So that's, there's this rasa of wonder, and then there's some involuntary reaction, indirectly related. So there can be something that doesn't appear to be related with Krishna. One gets some reaction, and then one connects that with Krishna. And Rupa Goswami will get to this, gives us example of Mother Yasoda, who sees a dream about Putana rolling around in her house and gets scared. And then in her fright, she has symptoms, but she immediately takes it to Krishna. Oh, what will happen to Krishna? But it didn't start with Krishna. From Rati Abbas, from a shadow of Rati. So this is often the case for sadhakas, for beginning sadhakas, that these sattvika bhavs come from a shadow or reflection. Rupa Goswami discusses varieties of intensity of sattvika bhavs, which is really a fascinating topic. Then there's the vyabhichari bhavs. Now the vyabhichari bhavs are interesting because they seem related to the secondary rasas in that they're different emotional states. So there's different emotions as we're experiencing these relationships, you know, as this girl is running up and down the corridor, as we're waiting to board the plane, you know, we're thinking maybe some fear. Oh, I hope that the airline agents don't harass the parents for having the girl run up and down the corridor, for example. So there might be some other emotions that go through us that then nourish the basic relationship. And Rupa Goswami analyzes the causes and how these various emotions are related to primary and secondary sthai bhavs, stages and strength. And these are compared to, like, again, waves that feed the general ocean. What I find especially fascinating in this section is, again, all emotions are there, even ones that we might think of materially as being extremely negative. In fact, we've got somebody needs to mute. We have the very first Vyavichari Bhav that Rupa Goswami lists is one of the most negative possible emotions that one could have. Like, wow, what a negative emotion. But everything has its place in bhakti in a joyful way. And how fortunate we are then that whatever we're experiencing in this world, even if it appears to be completely unrelated to Krishna, the Maya is not seeing the relationship to Krishna, as Krishna explains in the Chatur Slok, and we can immediately say, oh, how does this exist with Krishna? All right, and then the essential is the sthai bhav. Sthai means to stay. It's related to the English word stay or stable. And here we discussed the primary rasas, again, neutrality, servant, friendship, parental, conjugal, secondary, like wonder, chivalry, fear, etc. Pure and mixed rasas. Then rasa, that again, rasa is this combination of all of these elements that comes from the rati in primary and secondary. And we will look at the definition, Gaur Krishna's question about the definition of rati. We'll look at that right now. So he asked this question, what exactly is rati? Why does Srila Prabhupada not use this term very much? I don't know why Srila Prabhupada doesn't use the term rati very much. I really don't know. Rupa Goswami uses it throughout the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. It's very prevalent in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. It's defined as the smallest component of prema. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur has a wonderful description in Chaitanya Shikshamrita. If we have time today, we'll read that. But the rati is the smallest bit of prema that blossoms into prema. Also, Rupa Goswami talks about colors of sthai bhavs and corresponding deities, fascinating stuff, and various tastes. So we'll be discussing all of that. All right. We need your full focus. If you're doing something else, stop doing something else and just focus. Don't write anything down. Don't write anything down. Don't write anything down. I just want you to study this because then you're going to write it from memory. Just study this. So we're going to take right now a full minute to please study this slide. Do not write anything down. Okay, just from memory, please recreate the slide. It's all right if it's not perfect. Just remember, somebody needs to mute. Okay, now check. See how well you did. Give yourself a point for each thing that you got right. Doesn't have to be exact spelling. Give yourself a point for each thing you have right. Anybody who had all 6 right, please write the number 6 in the chat. Anyone who got all 6 right, just write the number 6 in the chat. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing with the English. So again, don't take notes, just study. I'll give you 1 minute. Study. Okay, write from memory. English. Check. If you got all 6 right, please put the number 6 in the chat. Okay. Now we're going to write a paragraph explaining the components of rasa using English terms. So here's a sample. A devotee has a basic connection with Krishna of a cowherd boy. Hearing about Krishna playing ball with his friends is a stimulant. The devotee starting to dance is a voluntary expression. His hairs stand on end as an involuntary expression, and he feels eagerness as an emotion. So this is a sample. This is a sample. So we're going to take 5 minutes for you to write your own paragraph explaining the components of rasa using the English terms. 5 minutes. If you have a question, just put it in the chat.
Please show the previous slide.
Excuse me?
Please show the previous slide.
You want me to show the previous slide again?
Yes.
Oh, that makes it too easy. I want you to try to do it without seeing the previous slide.
I didn't speak properly.
Sorry, give it a try. It's okay if it's not perfect, that's all right. Okay, very good. Gaura Keshava sent me a direct message with his. Any of you who'd like to, you can put your paragraph in the chat. You can send it just to me, or you can send it to everybody as you like. Anyone who'd like to share their paragraph? Very nice. Okay. Anybody else would like to share in the chat? Okay, these are wonderful. Anybody else like to share in the chat? It's okay if they're not perfect. Part of how we learn is just by trying. Okay, no problem. All right, we're going to go on. Now in Sanskrit, and I'm giving you, my sample is the exact same thing that I did with English, but I'm asking you to do one that's not the exact same thing that you did with the English. So I'm giving you a sample that's exactly the same as what I gave in English, but with Sanskrit, but I'm asking you choose something different and use the Sanskrit terms. Choose something different from what you chose for English and use the Sanskrit term. So here again, the sample, a devotee has a stai bhav of a cowherd boy. Hearing about Krishna playing ball with his friends is vibhav. The devotee starting to dance is anubhav. His hair stand on end is a sattvic bhav. He feels eagerness as a vyabhichari bhav. We're going to be using these terms over and 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 over in the next 12 weeks. And so it's a really good idea that everybody can be as familiar with them as possible. Okay, so now a paragraph explaining the components of rasa using the Sanskrit terms. Again, we're going to give you 5 minutes for this. If you do it on your computer, and if you'd like to share in the chat when you're done, please share in the chat when you're done. Please pick a different example than you picked for the English terms. As soon as you feel you're ready and you'd like, if any of you would like to share what you have in the chat, please do. Very nice. Anybody else ready to post in the chat? Very nice. Very nice. These are wonderful. Anybody else? Okay. Very nice. Excellent, excellent. I can see a few misunderstandings of Sattvika Bhava, but we'll get to that when we study Sattvika Bhava. Okay, this is wonderful. This is wonderful. Wow. All right. Excellent. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Wonderful. Okay. Yes. Wonderful. These are just absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much. All right. Now we're going to do a group interactive. We're going to do in a breakout room. So I'd like you to think of some kind of memory device for these Sanskrit words and for the English words. So you could have two different memory devices that you come up with. One could be for the Sanskrit and one could be for English, or if Krishna really inspires you with intelligence and cleverness, maybe you'll do one that combines both. We're going to take 15 minutes for this. This is going to be most of the rest of our time. We're going to work in groups of 4 to 5 people. And you can think of an acronym using the first letters of the Sanskrit words, you know, Staibab. Of course, we have Staibab and Satvikabab, which each start with S. You can have it as a picture or a graph. You know, we had that little graphic that you all copied, but you can make another graphic or a picture. You could write a poem. You can make a song. You could think of a simple story. There's other memory devices. So we're going to be working in groups of 4 to 5 people, and to come up with some easy way that you're going to then have for the rest of your life for yourself as teachers. I know a lot of you are also teachers of Shastra that you can also use in your teaching. All right, so I'd like to ask VIHE people to please set up breakout rooms. It's going to be 15 minutes, to set it for 15 minutes, 4 or 5 people, to come up with some kind of a memory device, something you could use, a memory trick.
Hare Krishna. You have not been, I don't know whether you were assigned any room or not, but now you're outside the meeting rooms. Would you like to get in? It's quite some time has already passed.
There's no point in having anybody join now. There's only one more minute.
Yeah. Okay.
We are going to want another breakout session, like right after this with a different grouping.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
I will vote for
Haribo.
Yes.
Mahashringa, you look like you're in a very interesting location. It's a fascinating ceiling. I wonder where you are. All right, well, I hope you at least made some progress in that regard. This is something if you want to work on your own after class, that's lovely. So we're going to have one last breakout room. There's going to be different groupings, and we're going to discuss this question. So, we're studying this, but let's say we haven't realized our Sai Baba. Let's say we have no idea, am I a peacock? Am I a cow? Am I a gopi? So how is this relevant to us as devotees? Again, keep in mind that Srila Prabhupada published Nectar of Devotion very early in ISKCON's history. All right, so this is the question, and we're going to go into breakout groups again, different breakout groups. If you could set that up, Dr. Dovale or whoever is doing that, please. Again, 10 minutes. Should I set it up? Is one of you going to set it up? The suspense. Somebody from the VIG setting this up? Dr. Dovale, can you set up breakout rooms? Should I set it up?
She's setting it up.
She's setting it up. Okay, great.
So the question is, how is all this relevant if we haven't realized our Sthayi Bhava?
Yes. While she's setting it up, you can think about it.
Otherwise, I can entertain everyone with the song we came up with.
Sure.
Okay, it's to the tune of Vibhava Rishesha. Vibhava is the stimulus, Anubhava is voluntary expression, Sattvika is involuntary, and Vyabhichari is emotion. All these influence the basic sthayi connection to produce a rasa or sweet taste of love for Krishna.
Whoa! That was amazing. That was amazing. If she takes any longer to set it up, I'm going to need to set this up. Anybody else want to share while we're waiting for Bhakti Dovalay to set up the next breakout
Sure.
room? Sure, okay.
So the what you see bhav is the bibhav. The what you do bhav is the anubhav. The what always stays bhav is the sthayi bhav. The when you tremble and go ik bhav, that's the sattvika bhav. And when you feel worry bhav, that's the vyabhichari bhav.
Oh, very nice. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anybody
Our
else?
group also has something. Yes, was good.
Okay, go ahead.
The word we got is Vasavyastara. V for Vibhava, A for Anubhava, Sad for Sadvika, Vya for Vyabhichari, Sta for Stai, and Ra for Rasa.
Wow, very nice. Anybody else want to share?
Mataji, we came up with Shri Vas Vaishnav. SVAS Shri Vas Vaishnav. Like that.
Oh, very nice. Chainakana?
Mataji, I could just try for 2 couplets that I could make for 2 bhav only. Sthai bhav stays as base for all the rasa, vatsalya, shanta, madhurya, dasya, or could be sakha. The second I wrote was, one may perspire, experience the hair standing, laugh with joy or cry. The sattvic bhava appears itself and you just don't have to try.
Wow. Oh, that is wonderful. Yes, Bhakti Dovalay, are you doing this or should I just do this randomly because time is escaping? And I tell people that I am going to end on time. Okay, there we go. Please join a breakout room and discuss the relevance. Thank you. Okay, so here are some possible answers. I also talked about earlier how understanding the science of rasa can actually help us become free from anartas, because we can analyze sorry, that was a glitch. Okay, so we have everybody back. Thank you for tolerating that little glitch. Here are some possible answers. We could also say, as we said earlier, that understanding the science can help us to analyze what so-called rasa we're finding in our anartas. Maybe some of you came up with a lot of other answers. We've gone 3 minutes over time, so I would really like to end now. We'll see you next week. And next week, we're going to be doing the first part of Vibhav. We're going to be doing Vibhav, the Alambana of Vishaya. We're going to be doing all about Krishna. And wow, what an ocean of nectar we're diving into here. It's just beyond description. Please have those 3 questions done 24 or more. It can be more than 24 hours in advance, so that I have enough time to go through them and that I have enough time to incorporate. I won't be answering the questions directly. I won't be able to answer 120 questions directly in the class, but I will do my best to incorporate the answers into the class itself. So I hope that this was inspiring. I hope that it was enlivening to look at this overview, and that now you have a framework that we can put in our study of the Southern Ocean. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Whatever good you have seen in me is all due to the mercy of Srila Prabhupada and our acharyas, and whatever bad in me is my own responsibility. Please don't emulate that, and I hope that you can excuse me. And we will see you all, Krishna willing, next week, when we're going to go swimming in the Southern Ocean.
Thank you, Urmila. I think you achieved your first goal, which was to chew it nicely and present it to the students in a way that they can get it.
Thank you very much.
Rupa Goswami ki jai.
Hare
VIH
Krishna.
organizing these nectarian